Hello, everybody, and welcome back to The Modern Firm. I'm your host, Noah Scher, and today I am very excited to be sitting down with Melissa Smallwood. Melissa is the president of Sim Financial Services, and she's got a unique background across many different industries. Melissa, thank you for being here.
Hi, thanks for having me.
So, I'd love to dig into your background a little bit. I know you spent nearly a decade in corporate construction before starting your own firm. So, what was that turning point for you? And if you'd like to tell us a little bit about your background and everything leading up to that.
Yeah, sure. So, kind of back it up just a little. I have always been like the nerd, right? I was thankful in high school. I had some business classes and some accounting classes that I really enjoyed. And then I got to my very first job, which was at Wells Fargo Bank, which kind of gave me an inside view of kind of how the banking system worked on a consumer side and on a business side. And so it was really fascinating to me. I got to work the business teller line often. So I got to see a lot of businesses that came in. We had a lot of check cashing companies. And that was really intriguing to me. When I was looking for a job when I went to college, that was kind of always in the back of my mind that I really wanted to get deeper into business, but wasn't really sure what that looked like. I needed money. So I just started applying to places and ended up getting an executive assistant type job. I was kind of like the assistant to the financial controller. It's not it's a national construction company, but the local division here in Phoenix. And I just basically said, whatever you want to throw at me, I'm a quick learner, willing to take it on, and was blessed in that position or with that company for almost 10 years, almost 8 years. And I moved everything, like executive assistant. I got thrown into payroll. I learned a lot in the payroll sector. I did equipment tracking. So this company's assets were owned by another company for liability protection. So I got to kind of learn about that. Got to learn about project accounting and how to, do cost accounting and things that I wasn't learning specifically in college, but was able to apply it. Got to learn software systems, stuff that they don't learn often in accounting programs in school. Unfortunately, I got to a position where I was being held back by the fact that I didn't have my degree yet. And in order to finish my degree, I needed to be able to take courses that were during this work day. And unfortunately, did not have a conducive boss that would allow me to work early or work late on other days to make up that time. So I started looking, when you're in your 20s, you don't realize that people have access to kind of like what your search features are and so on and so forth. And so I started looking for new positions on like my lunch break or whatever and got caught. So ended up getting terminated, which honestly was one of the best things that ever happened because it was employee owned. We had stock shares. And so that provided me some financial relief to go and finish those courses. And then from there, I was able to get a CFO controller job for another construction company. But it was always to the point where I couldn't make effective changes, right? I was always just looked at as somebody who was there to process the information and to provide information to the owners, but never really enact change. And so I got burnt out. And so that's when I decided to go back to quit accounting altogether. And go back to school. And I said, I'm good with numbers. What else can I do that isn't accounting? And I got into a program at Florida International for statistics. So I moved out to Florida, started my MBA, my doctorate program out there. So it was kind of a whirlwind at the beginning, but that is eventually what catapulted me into doing business for myself. Was the desire to assist businesses in being successful without just being the pusher of information.
Yeah, totally. So after that, thank you for sharing that. What led to starting SIM and how long has it been and what's your guys' team size? How is everything in today going?
Yeah, so I came back from Florida with the notion of I don't know what I want to do. I was doing work with the government out in Florida. Just wasn't really my jam. What I was working on was very emotional, draining. And so I moved back to Arizona in 2015 and said, I don't know what I want to do. I might as well just teach, right? So that notion that teaching is easy, which is not. Bless those individuals that do it. But my mom was a teacher or still is to this day. And so I was like, she made it look easy with raising 4 kids by herself. So I'm just going to go teach, right? Like, tell me what I got to do. And so they told me I got to take some tests. And if I pass the test, then they'll give me a classroom. And I was like, Okay. And so I passed all of the tests. I passed the elementary ed, I passed the middle school math test, I passed the high school math test, and I was afforded a job in downtown Phoenix teaching sixth grade math and science. And I quickly learned while I loved the concept of teaching, I did not like teaching in the school system. And so because I'm not a quitter, I stuck it out for the rest of the year, but I ended up turning my classroom into like a mini business. So my kids would get paid to come to school every day. They would have to pay for their desks. And then we ran math class like a business. And so these are kids that couldn't fully grasp the concepts that were being taught within the books because they were so unrelatable. And so we did a lot of relatable math on like a business level or, writing recipes and that type of stuff,
For sure.
which I loved. And so I was like, okay, if I can teach sixth graders how to run a business or how to run and function within a business, I can just do this on my own. And what's the saying? Like, if a man can do it, why can't I? No. And so I figured if anybody can do it, I'm not uneducated, I'm not unemployable, so I might as well just step out into starting a business. I'm born and raised in Arizona, so I have connections here. And I went off to the Dominican Republic for a month and sat there and wrote a business plan and came back and found my first client within 10 days. And I have just been wildly successful since then. June 15th will mark 10 years in business. And so it's just a team of one. I'm the sole operator of the business. I do have a phenomenal virtual assistant, and then that helps me with like my marketing and stuff. But
For
truly,
sure.
it's just me.
Yeah.
But we have grown. I'm pretty at the point where it's about 10 to 20% year over year for the last 10 years. So I think I've been blessed, when you take the risk on yourself and you're rewarded for it. Have made every mistake in the book. I have had to go to court for clients to get paid, but I would not change what I do now to go back to work for somebody for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a compelling story. I wish that more teachers had that mindset of actually teaching the students real world applicable skills, right? A lot of it's just memorization and it's a bunch of BS. So I love that you were doing that.
Yeah,
So
and
how was,
unfortunately I don't think it's really the teacher's issue, right? They have and it's similar to what happens in the corporate world, right? Like you have rules that you have to follow. If you want to keep your job, you kind of have to stay in line. I'm a rule breaker, and so I figured I wasn't going to renew my contract, right? And so what could they do? They would end up either firing me, okay, or they just let me did what I do for the next 6 months and kind of do our best to get these kids any further ahead than they really were. So
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. So I'd like to touch into a little more about the business. I know that a lot of your work kind of revolves around helping businesses get their financials in order and whatnot. Why do you think that so many businesses, especially in construction, struggle with that?
Yeah, so I always say business is my business. So business is easy for me.
Hmm.
But for most entrepreneurs, business is not their business. Their business is something that they're good at, a skill, a trade, a widget, a service, something that they're providing to other people. And they're phenomenal at that. That's why they went into business. It's something they're passionate about. But they forget that it isn't just waking up and going into the office every day like it is with a regular job, and somebody else in a different department or a different cubicle is picking up the slack in those other areas. And so that's kind of where I bridge the gap for a lot of clients, is allowing them to have one understanding. A lot of them just don't know. They don't fully understand the rules and regulations in their industry when it relates to tax reporting, when it relates to payroll. Payroll's a big compliance component. Sales tax is a big compliance component. And so if I can get with clients sooner than later, we can write roadmaps for them to really be successful doing what they do, and having somebody else pick up the pieces that allows them to stay in compliance with the people that get them in trouble very quickly.
Yeah, that makes sense. So once you do get a business's financials sorted, then how do you see that typically, playing out in their day-to-day operations or growth? Do you have any like success stories that you like to share or that something that resonates with you?
So my ultimate goal is for the client to grow so substantially that we have to hire a full-time person in my position. So truly, that's what it is. So, some people just don't want it. They just want to, make enough. But my goal really is to get them to be successful enough that they either have a full part-time person or a full-time person doing the back office. I have seen that go. I have an insurance company that took off, and they're doing phenomenal. And so I just kind of oversee like a CFO type role for them, just to make sure that the people that they're hiring are doing what they're supposed to do. We're looking out for the best interest of the owners. We can look at if they've got some extra profit, if we want to return those back to, whether it's commissions or, extra benefits for clients. And then I have some smaller clients. I have some clients that have been with me since the beginning, a lot of nonprofits that they just do really well what they do in the community. But they're not really, interested in growing past, who they're currently serving. And so I always say, like, I'm kind of like the general practitioner doctor for a lot of businesses. I'm really good at a lot of different things, but I'm not a CPA, right? So I don't specialize in corporate taxes or like that big structure stuff. But you can come to me with all your little ailments, and then I have referrals that I can give for those specialties if we get to the point where they've outpaced what it is that I'm either willing or can provide for them.
Yeah, absolutely. That reminds me of what you said of a thing that my dad used to always tell us growing up is it's better to be good at a lot of different things than to be like crazy master of one specific thing, right? Kind of like a jack of all trades. You want to touch on everything and spread yourself wide. That's going to give you a better position than just focusing in really hard on something specific, right?
Yeah, that's the really cool thing about the business that I've created is I have clients in a ton of different industries, right? And every accounting at its premise, at its basis is the same, right? Assets equal, liabilities and owner's equity. It is what it is. Profit and loss statement, right? But every industry has different rules and regulations when it comes to IRS tax codes and payroll compliance and whether you're a union or not. And so that's the part that's fun for me is that if I bring on a new client that is in an industry that maybe I'm not as well versed in, and they're willing to give me a chance to, learn with them or do some research or, work with a mentor that is more, versed in that area, then I get to learn. So I'm really learning every single day, not only teaching others, but learning, every day for me and stepping out of my comfort zone to do, things like that or, speaking engagements where I can really show others kind of why I do what I do and why I'm really passionate about what I do.
Totally. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I could not agree more. Definitely acknowledging that we don't know everything and just absorbing, being a sponge, right, to everyone around us. I mean, that's even the reason I started this podcast, right?
Yeah.
Everyone that I bring on is way more experienced than I am, has done way bigger things. And so I like to bring them on to kind of learn from them, right? So, Melissa, I'd love to kind of touch into what you mentioned with the non-for-profit stuff. I know you spent some time in that world. How did that experience, shape the way you think about business? Did it change anything or what do you see there?
Yeah. I don't think people, maybe they do, maybe they don't fully understand that a nonprofit is truly a business. It's a business operation. The biggest difference is they have to return their profits back into the mission of the organization, right? And so at its basis, they are the same. However, their intent and their goal on a day-to-day basis isn't profit, right? So they're really mission driven. And so that when I first started in it, that was a big shift for me. Just being in big corporate, being in the banking world where everything revolves around money, 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 right? How much can we make? How much can we save? How do we not pay taxes and all of these things? Turning that into a mindset of how do we take these dollars and be the best steward of our mission? And then how does that fit in a role like bookkeeping, making sure that that information is accurate, making sure that, our financials are correct so that we can go after bigger grants, that our grants are being tracked properly so that we can go after even larger grants so that we can have a major impact in the community. And so a lot of my clients are in the art space, which is probably the polar opposite of my personality. I'm not an artistic person. I don't do a lot in the art space, but what they provide is very much centered around making their community better, which is a big thing that I love to do. My goal is to make everybody as successful as possible and just divulge any information that I can to help people do that. And so it was a cool thing. I always joke, I'm not a religious person. And so one of my first clients in the nonprofit sector was a church. And so I learned a lot of vernacular necessary for not only nonprofit work, but church work at the same time. And so it was fun for me because again, I, enjoy learning and just meeting different people. Again, I had a conversation with somebody who, in today's political climate, some people like to box themselves into certain things. And it can happen in business too, right? Like you can choose to align yourself as a business owner with people that are only aligned with the way that you think, right? And I find that very opposite of kind of how I run my business because ultimately I just want people to be successful. And I don't if you're out there doing what it is that you do, you're not being a disrespectful person, then I'm here to help. And I don't look at especially like nonprofits. There's nonprofits whose missions may not align with how I function in my day to day, but I run a business and my business is to make other businesses successful. And that's truly kind of like how I like to walk. I always say I meet people where they're at and I ask them where they want to go. And if I can be a facilitator in making that happen, great. If I don't feel like that's a good fit, then I will be honest and I will move, them on to a referral that may be a better fit for them.
Yeah, totally. A lot of people have that closed-minded where they don't want to work with anyone who has any varying opinions than they do. And I just think that that's limiting yourself, right? Like you said, as long as someone is not being disrespectful or anything like that, it's okay to work with people who have different opinions. And if anything, it's new ideas, right? Someone's thinking a certain way for a reason. Try to understand maybe why they think that way and then share some values like that.
Yeah, and a lot of it comes from learned experience or lived
Yeah.
experience, right? I haven't lived the same experience as somebody walking next to me. So my ability to say, no, that isn't correct, or no, that you can't do that is only based on my experience and not something that they've also been through. And so I also kind of find it a little lacking of professionalism if somebody knows fully how you walk, right? I don't it's not part of my brand and I don't know that it should really be a part of most businesses brand to plaster the box that you choose to walk in. And maybe again that may be the unpopular opinion in today's climate, but ultimately it doesn't sway me one way or the other. If you're going to be rude, if you're going to be disrespectful, if you're going to be demanding, if you want to ask for the world and pay for pennies, those are where we might have issues. But outside of that, I'm just here to work. I'm just here to
Exactly.
work and to teach, right?
Yeah, it doesn't have to be a big deal unless someone makes it a big deal and is
Absolutely.
purposefully making it apparent, right? So, Melissa, I'd love to kind of touch into another thing. Strategic planning is a big part of what you do. I wanted to ask you, what is the biggest mistake that you see businesses make, when they try to plan for growth? What's the most common mistake that you see?
Yeah, so I would say most small businesses do not plan. They plan for today. They may plan for the end of the week, but they don't really plan for the end of the year. A portion of my business is doing taxes. While I offer services to go over, financials on a quarterly basis, on a monthly basis, in order to do some cash projections and to do some tax planning projections, a lot of businesses just they forget about that piece. A lot of these individuals start a business, they've been an employee their whole life, right? And so taxes come out of their check, benefits get paid out of their check. They don't have to do a lot of the thinking pieces around those aspects. And so when it comes to taxes at the end of the year or payroll taxes, they forget about the cash that is required for those, and then they get themselves into a hole, or they just out of sight out of mind for months, years down the road, and then they want to buy a house or they want to do some type of investments, but they don't have books in order, or they have maybe these large tax liabilities that are kind of hanging over their head that really can come back and bite them down the road. Whether that's increasing costs for insurance because your credit has gone down. I think, again, it goes with the strategic planning too. I don't think that a lot of business owners really realize that business credit doesn't exist for a very long time. Your business credit is your personal credit. And if your personal credit is not great, you are going to have a hard time securing loans, securing finances, getting credit cards. So you're really going to have to be out of pocket for everything for a very long time. And so part of that strategic plan really is understanding that your personal credit and how you operate in your day-to-day life really is going to have a major impact on whether or not your business is going to be successful.
Yeah.
The other thing that strategically I like to ask people is to look short term and then long term. So, what do you want to happen in the next 6 months? What are you willing to change in order to make that happen? Because most of the time there is some change necessary. And then what do you want to happen in the next 3 to 5 years? For some people, it's nothing, right? They don't want, they're happy where they're at. They like their lifestyle. I'm probably one of those people that fall into that. Could I scale my business and have employees? Absolutely. Do I want to add the stress to my life? I'm not sure about that. And so, asking clients strategically, what do they want to do? What are they willing to give up to get there? And then what happens once they get there to remain there or keep moving?
Yeah, it's easy to get caught up in the day to day. So essentially what you're saying is to kind of think long term and set plans and process, right? So when the time comes, you're ready.
Yeah. And even just budgeting. I mean,
Yeah.
looking with some clients at what they spend money on is very eye opening for both of us. And it's not always a comfortable conversation. Writing contracts and understanding contracts between business partners as it relates to strategic planning is also something that's very important. Understanding the tax implications, understanding the liability implications that come with that. So, strategic planning, I know, like, in my schooling era, we used to do SWOT methods and, that type of stuff. And those are such ugly words to me now because I don't ever want to go back and do any of those analysis, but they are helpful to a point, at least getting the thought process out there, right? So, there's so much that goes into the application of the thought that I try not to overwhelm people. So it's
Yeah.
like, what are your thoughts? Let's write them down. And then which ones can we do today? Which ones can we do a week from now? Which ones can we do a year from now? And then how do we follow up and measure those?
Yeah. I think that's something that a lot of business owners need to hear and that they don't hear, right?
Right.
So Melissa, kind of thinking big picture, what is next for your business, 3 to 5 years down the line? What do you have planned for it? Are you thinking of potentially bringing on employees, or do you kind of want to stay on your own there, or what are your plans for that?
So I've been thinking about this a lot lately. So, my husband's on the closer end of retirement than the not end of retirement, right? And so we're kind of in that 5 to 10 year plan of what, this looks like. Personally, for me, I really want to get out and do either more podcasts. So I appreciate, you taking the time to allow me to do this.
Thank you.
Or just public speaking engagements, running workshops for individuals and making it a safe space for people to come in and ask all of those questions that they either feel like they have to pay somebody to do it or they just don't even know where to Google and look for it. And then from there, looking to potentially buy some businesses and expand that way versus bringing on employees within what it is that I do now. But our industry is an aging industry. And so there's a lot of CPAs and a lot of people that are in the retirement phase of their business. And so, linking up with them and seeing what it would be to either, take it over, to buy it, and then keep those individuals in place to run those organizations and just kind of manage them on the backside. But I think the biggest thing for me would just be able to get my knowledge out more or better. I always joke with people that I have so much in my brain that I just want to dump out to people, in a passionate, heartfelt way, but also in a digestible way because it's not an easy industry to digest for a lot of people. And so getting comfortable on camera, getting comfortable, speaking, and then just getting the information out to people so that we can have an economy of very successful entrepreneurs.
For sure. Yeah. I was actually going to tell you on that point, you should do some form of podcast or public speaking. I mean, it would be a shame to just not get that out there, like you said, with all the expertise. And anyone who has a lot of expertise like that and that has been across so many different industries and founded businesses, I think should definitely spread it more. That's why I bring people on like you to learn
Yeah,
from you, obviously.
I suffer from imposter syndrome pretty severely, right?
Yeah.
So, for a long time in this industry, if you don't have your CPA license or you don't have your EA, you're nothing, right? Nothing's a harsh word, but that's what most people, they're like, oh, are you a CPA? And I'm like, no, but I can do the vast majority of what CPAs do. I don't do audits. I don't do forensic account. I don't do some of the things, right?
Yeah.
So that's always what's held me back, is that, like, do I actually know what I'm talking about? Are people actually going to be interested in what it is that I'm talking about? Or now with social media, which social media terrifies me, is somebody going to, am I going to be able to take constructive criticism? Which I do pretty good on a one-to-one basis.
Mhm.
But with that information being out, in the Reddit posts and all this Twitter stuff, and for somebody who has such type A personality, that is the terrifying part, is having that information out there and people being like, yeah, you don't actually know what you're talking about.
Yeah. No, the internet is a terrible place. You see way more negativity online than you ever do in person. For example, one of my cousins, I mean, like I said, I come from a line of accountants. One of my cousins is not a CPA, but he's a brilliant accountant. And so his strength and what he realized is that he didn't want to get his CPA. The whole process was not worth it to him. But he is a very talkative guy, very personable. Like you'd love him from the second you talk to him, right? And so that trumps, I feel, that mixed with experience will trump the CPA title, in my opinion, because a lot of CPAs, and this is a diss at my own family even, that are CPAs, they're very
Yeah.
atypical accountants, right? Just 3-word responses, very matter of fact, and a lot of clients don't want to deal with that, right? So we're seeing the shift in people going to advisors who can kind of connect on that human level and genuinely break down the numbers and break down everything in a way that makes sense to them, right? Not just
Yeah.
dump the books on them and walk away. So
Yeah.
I
Just
definitely, I
again,
definitely
we
see what
talked
you're talking
about,
about.
yeah, we talked about it being digestible, right? You
Yep.
have to meet people where they are. And it teaches me a lot too, because
Yeah.
there are some times where I just go straight into accountant mode, right? And I'm like, and then I'm like, okay, well, do they have experience with any of that, vocabulary? And if they don't, how do I make it relatable to what it is they do? And I think that has probably been one of my biggest strengths over the last 20 years of business, and dealing with so many different types of personalities and so many different types of people, and then dealing with kids, is meeting people where they can understand it. And not getting, I probably only get really short with my husband when he doesn't understand something really quickly, but being patient. I run a million miles an hour, and it does take a lot for me to slow down and chunk it out and then shut my mouth, right? And then ask if they have any questions, or ask if there was something that they didn't understand. And I do agree with you that that probably is what also has made me successful, is that I like to think I'm pretty personable. I like to think that I'm not off-putting or, cold when it comes to, the way I give information to people.
Yeah.
I definitely can turn that hat on, right? Sometimes I just get in like go mode.
Hmm.
But for the most part, my husband just says I like to gab. And that's really what it is. If I could feel like I'm talking to a friend and then just providing as much information to them as possible, that's what I enjoy the most.
Exactly. And that's what I've been seeing with a lot of the firm owners I speak with is that is starting to shift. People are kind of sick of that boring CPA, boring accountant that just rambles in their jargon and the client doesn't understand 80% of what they're saying, right? So being able to actually translate what the numbers mean, because it is a language at the end of the day,
Sure.
to understand all of this. So absolutely agree with you there. Megan, last question for you
Sure.
is, where do you see the market going? Not just accounting or bookkeeping or finance, but the entire everything mixed together with everything new that's coming out, whether that's the new AI tools, automation, all the tariffs. There's the space we're in 2025. Where do you see the industry headed?
So it's interesting. Somebody asked me, and I think they put it in a Facebook group post as well, is that if income tax goes away, how does that hurt or help our industry? And two, with automation that is coming in and automated tools, how does that hurt or help our industry? I am a big proponent of allowing folks in certain income levels to get ahead, right? If we can get them to get ahead, if that means less tax, then they can buy assets. And then there's, because ultimately my goal is really to have people be successful. And if we can take away some of the burden on a day-to-day level and allow them to get into these other areas. I think that's going to be phenomenal. What that's going to look like, I think, is very different than what is broadcast on a daily basis on TV. And I think if people looked into the weeds of some of I think because I used to work in government, that a lot of it's like, I don't know if you've ever seen that glacier meme or whatever, where you see like this much of
Top.
the glacier at the top, and really the information that you really need to see is below.
Yeah.
And taking emotions out of that information, I think is going to be beneficial for folks. But because we're so stressed about the day to day just functioning, we don't have the time to do that, right? So I'm concerned with some mental capacity of where our economy is going, and some mental fatigue of what's going to happen with individuals that might just become so overwhelmed or so fatigued that they just stop trying, right? And then we're going to have maybe an even bigger economic issue with, refund, repossessions of assets and, that type of stuff. So I'm keeping an eye on that. To me, the only thing I can control is my day, right? And so that's what I try to tell people. You can watch what you watch on TV, you can let it impact how your mood is that day, but at what cost, right? Whether it's your health, whether it's your mental stability, whether it's how you communicate with other people at work, which may end up having you lose your job because of any one of those, before mentioned things. And is it worth it? And so, that's kind of my thought process on today's economic climate. And then really, working with business owners to say, like, what can we do to mitigate costs? What can we do to mitigate liability? And if that means taking less profit, right? We talk about tariffs, and we talk about that is increasing potentially the cost of goods sold side of businesses, right? And I was joking with my husband. So prices went up substantially during COVID, right? And then prices were supposed to come back down because cost of goods sold came back down, right? But it never happened. And so it's really having people look at what do you want your impact to be on society? Do you want to continue to be that over profitable take type mentality, or do we want to scale back so that we can have that good karma? Like, I like to talk about good karma. So if we can have that good karma moving forward. So for me, on the accounting side of things, I would be really excited not to have to do personal income taxes. Do I do it? Yes. Do I enjoy it? I don't enjoy watching people just send half their earned paychecks, into something that they don't have a lot of control over. So it's not like in Arizona, it's really cool. We can actually dictate where our tax dollars are spent prior to them ever making it to the state. So we have some
Really?
phenomenal tax credit programs here, which is a big baby of mine that I try to push out. And so, but on the federal side, we don't have a lot of say in where those funds are going. And so
Yeah.
if we have the ability to keep some of that in our own pocket and then really dictate where we choose to spend our dollars, whether it's in our local community, whether it's helping other organizations, whatever that might be, I think that's phenomenal. When it comes to like AI tools, I don't ever think in the accounting industry it's going to overtake a human brain. Maybe not in my lifetime, right? And so I think the emotional component of it, the analytical, there's a good amount of analyzing that can be done, but it can't read your mind. It can't read how you want to use your money, right? It just can read where you've currently used your money. So,
Yeah.
again, and it's getting smarter every day, but I'm not worried about it. We had the same thing. You're a little younger than I am, but we had the whole same thing in the Y2K, like the world is going to end function. That was my senior year of high school, right? And we're all still here, and we're probably doing much better than we were, back then. So I don't know. Again, I just think I can only change my day. And if I get up and I do what I'm supposed to do and I work hard and I treat people well, then I'm going to be able to be successful tomorrow. And
Yeah.
that's kind of how I just look at my day.
100%. I like that you say that because a lot of people that I speak with, and I'll just give you a quick background on what I do. I run a firm where we help accounting, bookkeeping, tax firms, implement AI into their business. So a lot of the firm owners that I speak with, they have this like huge sense of doom that they're going to get replaced and get eradicated and, be left on the streets. And they're so hesitant to even look at new technology, right? And I tell them that you don't have to worry about like the state of the economic world or all these new technologies and have this doom. You can just, like you said, try your best every single day, try to leverage them for your own benefit and for the benefit of others. And other than that, you just trust the process, right? Like worrying
Yeah.
so hard about every minute detail does nothing. It just creates a headache and it's just going to take away from your focus.
Well, I mean, if we look at the health industry, right, the medical
Yeah.
industry, the robotics that have been now implemented into surgical procedures are changing lives and saving lives, right? And so we could be so against, any of this new technology that either makes surgery faster, we can get more people in. And I'm not even talking on the profit side of things. I'm really just talking like, we talk about Canadian health systems and how backlogged trying to get into a medical provider really is. If we can get more people in on a daily basis because we have, extra hands, we can analyze things right then and there. Um, I don't know. I find AI fascinating. I think that's the engineering brain of me. And the fact that if I can give away some of my work, which means I can go to a baseball game during spring training, or I can have my weekends back and not contacting clients all the time and spending my weekends doing that. I'm all for it.
Yeah, 100%. I could not agree more. Just using it, leveraging it in the right ways and not being afraid of it. The same thing with the internet, right? People were so scared of the internet and so hesitant to it, but ultimately it came and you could have rejected it and have been forced to implement it later or got
Yeah.
ahead of the curve and use it. So
And I
thank you for
do,
sharing that.
yeah, and I will have to say, I think some of the hesitation comes from how the information is presented. And I think that kind of correlates to accounting information. So when you spit AI information to somebody who's never really used it in a manner that is so undigestible, they're just going to be like, I'm not even going to try it.
Mhm.
Right. Like we talk, I'm going to put a Waymo. I don't know if you guys have Waymo in Chicago, but like the self-driving cars we have here in Phoenix freaks me out. I still haven't gotten in one, but it's still like, there's some people that want to try it and and those people then get to talk to the next person. But if it's just shoved down your face, by individuals and you have to try this and it's the best thing out there and we're going to call you 15 times until you're willing to try this, that's what gets people turned off. And I think there is some of that in all industries, right? I think that is industries wide, which is why I don't like sales. Like I don't like to say I'm a salesperson, even though I have to do sales on a daily basis, right? Putting that information out there, letting people test it, letting people drive for a little bit, letting people sit in the backseat of a Waymo and just going around, a parking lot, whatever that might be, that then allows them to be like, oh, I liked this, but I didn't like this. Do we have something that can do this? So I think there's always going to be useful tools out there. There's always going to be people that are never willing to try it. I mean, ask my mom at 73 to type on a keyboard. You're going to find her just hunting and picking with two fingers. But then you're going to have, I have a client who's a neurosurgeon who's also in her 70s who is phenomenal on the keyboard. So, just finding your right audience too, I think
Yeah,
is also really helpful when
100%.
it comes to innovation.
Totally, yeah. And I like that you say that. I also agree with you that typical like salesman persona, it's irritating and they don't really sell much, right? The best way of sales, in my opinion, is to if you have a good product or a good service, present it and then let them think about it and decide, right? Not this overly convincing, sending you a trillion emails. I mean, my entire email box is full of people just trying to sell me something, right?
Yeah.
So having something
Especially if
good and
you're
just
dealing with
presenting it.
type A personalities, we are not easily sold on anything, right?
Yeah,
We have to drive it, we have to try it, we have to fail at it 14 times before we'll be like, "Nah, okay, you're right, you were
yeah,
right? We're not going to tell you you're right from the beginning.
yeah,
And again, that correlates back to accounting. Sometimes I'll just be like, hey, I'll be on hourly contract with you because you're not ready to go on a monthly contract. And then half the time they'll come back and be like, yeah, that's just it's way more than I want to handle.
yeah.
Okay. Oh, I only talk to people on contract and come back to me when you're ready. It just doesn't go over well with people. And so, understanding your audience, again, it goes back to meeting people where they're at. And that's why, but again, that's why we have successful business owners, and we have business owners that fail, unfortunately, many times before they find what it is they're successful in. And the last kind of point I wanted to make, though, too, is not everybody is meant to be a business owner. And that's okay. We absolutely need employees to do probably the vast majority of jobs, right? And there's nothing wrong with being an employee. And I think there's a bad stigma that's tied to labor. There's bad stigma that's tied to being a W-2 employee versus a business owner.
Yeah.
And I find that really interesting because a lot of people would not be able to be business owners if not for employees and if not for being an employee themselves at one point. And so that stigma is also something that I really want to get across to people, is that if you've never been an employee, I feel like you won't ever be a great business owner because you don't know what it's like to have bad bosses. You don't know what it's like to fail and to get fired and to do all of the things. And so it's harder in today's generation with like social media and influencers and people that may have never had a job, and then the entitlement that comes with being called a boss or being called a business owner without having much of the background. So
Yep.
I
You
kind of want to
literally,
throw it out there that, employees are beneficial, employees are necessary. And I think starting as an employee, if that's where you start,
yeah.
and then becoming a business owner is often a better road for success than just kind of diving right into business ownership.
For sure. You literally just read my mind. I was about to tell you, especially in my generation, with social media, everyone's like, oh, just start a business, as if that's like something easy, right? Or anything like that. I think, oh, just start a business, you'll make money. And they shit on people that, are 9 to 5s and W-2s and everything
Yeah.
like that. Even though I'm sure all their parents work W-2s or most of them. And that's like the backbone of society. Like you said, a business can't function without people
Yeah.
working under the business, right? Like certain people are built for being business owners, and then certain people are meant to be good workers and get paid well and do a good job. Not everyone has to be an entrepreneur, just like another buzzword, right? Entrepreneur, everything like that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
totally agree with
I
you
mean,
there.
take that young girl that became famous for her little hawk tour or whatever it was, right? And then she started was it a coin or something, had bad business partners, and is now facing like
Yeah.
severe legal action because of it, because she put bad people in her corner or people that just squared her wrong, but she had no experience in building into, that business. She was just kind of thrusted into that. And it potentially could be the detriment of the rest of her life, right?
Yeah. 100%.
And I'm just like, I'm looking at this girl and she's in her 20s, and I'm just like, oh, I just want to like grab her and shake her and just be like, just go back to being, who you were back then. But, that's again, it's this generation that just stardom is so eye opening. And, it's like the take me to the light, kind of scenario. And you're just like, just bring it back just a little, because once that fall from grace can be substantial.
Yeah. I saw what you're referencing. And yeah, she probably had no business experience prior. She got relevant off of a clip, and then she probably surrounded herself with people who sold themselves and lied to
Yeah.
her probably and make it seem
Yeah.
like, hey, partner with us and we'll make you a lot of money. And that's a huge thing that a lot of people in this generation think is, with TikTok or Instagram, they think, oh, start a business and then in a year they're gonna be in a Lamborghini on the coast of Spain just enjoying life with no worries,
Yeah.
right? That's not
Yeah.
how it goes. Every business owner I've spoken to always tells me how there was years and years of trials and tribulations and failure until you eventually overcome that and learn.
Yeah. And I would love for people to understand that working a job is the best free education that you can get. I always say, even if you don't keep the same job for a while, right? That again, that's part of this kind of generation of workforce. And I don't necessarily find that a bad thing, right? If you're not interested in the work that you do, if you don't enjoy it, find something that you enjoy and take that free experience and that free education. Like, I would not be where I'm at today if it wasn't for taking an executive assistant position where I had no idea what I was going to get into, and taking that free experience and being like, oh my God, I'm really good at business. I really enjoy this accounting thing. It's not as boring as one said it was. It's, there's so many different avenues to it. and then building on that experience and building on that experience, and oftentimes for free or paid to do it, right?
Yeah.
We talk about having to go to college. And while I think college is really important for certain industries, like, potentially accounting, bookkeeping, maybe not so much, you can learn on the job, but like accountants, CPAs, lawyers, doctors, that type of stuff. But there's so many jobs that you can get, whether they're blue collar jobs, whether they're, trades jobs, or just out there just learning, where you can make six figures plus, and you have a skill set that's really going to be necessary for, for generations, because who knows what the next big fad is going to be, right? TikTok may go away, which we've already seen as, as a possibility. Instagram may change. They may not pay you out anymore. YouTube may change. I know they've changed several times on what their pay structure is, and what the baseline is to start getting paid. I don't know how Twitter works at all, but you don't have control of any of that information or any of how that structure works, right? That's somebody else's business. But if you can take that free information or that paid for information and learn from it, to be able to then be like, oh, I'm going to start this on my own, and now I have full control over how much I make, or who I deal with, or what I want this to look like. I think that's so important, and I think lost on a lot of people these days that are coming up through college, and their first entry level jobs and stuff like that. They just want it to be like the best job they've ever had, like right from the beginning. And I feel
Exactly.
like you can't learn that way. It's
Yeah.
like, being handed a silver spoon and all the wealth in the world, and still ending up in jail because you don't know what to do with any of that. You don't have any skills, you don't have any common sense sometimes. And now you've squandered all of that away by making some silly decisions. And
Yeah.
so
An analogy
I
of
think
that
that's
is that's the sorry to cut you off. That's the same reason that every lottery winner goes broke after what, 5 years is the
yep.
statistic, is because they have no skills.
Yeah.
Easy silver spoon, like you said, golden ticket, and then you're gonna lose it, right? It's easy, it might be easy to make money, people say, but it's hard to retain and to
Mhm.
continue the foundation, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And forgiveness of yourself for making stupid mistakes. We're all
Yeah.
going to make mistakes. What do they say? There, no question is a stupid question. No mistake is truly a stupid mistake. They're only stupid if you don't learn from them, right? So if you continuously make the same dumb decisions, we often see that in like relationships, right? Like that's probably our, where we see it the most. But if you learn from every mistake that you have, and you try not to make the next mistake be bigger than the one you made before, then all it is a learning tool.
Yeah.
It's like getting an F in, I think I got an F in my very first microeconomics class. And I was like, I started college when I was 16, 17, right? And they threw me in a microeconomics class, and I'm like, in a world religion class. And I'm like, what? I had zero concept of any of it. I didn't grow up in a religious background. I worked at the bank, but my mom was a teacher, and we really weren't, financially stable at all. And so I'm like, and I thought my life was ruined because I was on scholarship at ASU, right? Like, I now have two Fs. I lost my scholarship. Like, might as well just throw my hands up and quit. And I didn't. Thankfully, it took me forever. It still took me 10 years to get through, my first college. But, I had to learn along the way. I had to learn because now I had to take out student loans. I had to work. I still had to do these things. But I never let it like defeat me. And thankfully didn't, go crazy or anything like that. But then I was able to travel the world and find some value in economics. I found value in world religion, which I never in my right mind would have thought I would find any interest in. I found value in history and how it can be used in today's society. As long as people are willing to learn or ask help for, you make a mistake, ask help, make a mistake, ask help,
Yeah.
ask, there's always going to be somebody who's smarter than you, and fill your room with people that are smarter than you. I think that's a huge thing that a lot of people aren't willing to do also, is fill their room with people that are smarter than them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the
I'm a very smart person, right? But there's 1,000 million people that are way smarter than me. And it's not intimidating, if you let it be. I guess it can be, but truly, it can only make you better.
yeah. It's the oldest saying in the book is that, nothing is a failure, it's just a learning opportunity, but
Mhm.
no one applies it in practice, right? Even myself, I had a real estate business a couple years ago that ended up failing. I lost some money on it and I was so devastated. I was getting in my head. I was like, oh, like I'm done for life. Like I'm never going to be successful, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
But then I kind of had that mindset shift of it is what it is. It didn't work out. There's no point in sulking over it. Just keep going, right? So I love that you say that. Very true.
Yeah.
And so many people don't apply it.
Nothing a good vacation, a glass of tequila can't fix. That's what I said.
That's the real fix to everything.
Yeah. That's how I solve problems. A good vacation, a checkout, and a glass of tequila.
That's the best way. That's the best way. Melissa, thank you so much for hopping on. This was a very insightful conversation, and I want to thank you for sharing this with the audience.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for allowing me to do this for the very first time.
Of
It
course.
wasn't as scary as I expected it to be. So
Yeah.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, Melissa.